Administrator, really focused on driving business results through the increase of the representation of women in the C-suite, the management ranks, and business ownership. And so we appreciate you joining us this morning. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Everybody will be muted, and we ask you to stay on mute just to minimize any background noise for our speakers. And then if you will put yourself in the speaker view on Zoom, that will give you the best experience, because as each speaker speaks, it will bring up their face on the screen. And so that will be the easiest and probably most productive way. We're not going to use slides this morning. This is going to be a panel discussion. And so that'll be the easiest way for you. And then ask that if you have questions, we are going to save a few minutes at the end of our time today to have a little bit of Q&A. So if you have questions, we ask you to simply type those in the chat box, and then we'll try to get to a few of those at the end of our discussion today. So no doubt, all of you are just like us. We are living in a world right now that none of us would have even contemplated 90 to 120 days ago. And so there are probably those of you on the call that were in a job search at the time COVID hit, and you saw all of your efforts come to a screeching halt for a period of time. There are probably those of you who have been furloughed or laid off based on COVID. There are others of you who may have a job and you were in the middle of contemplating, hey, I think I'm ready for my next move. I may be looking for a position. And now you're sitting there going, gosh, maybe I'm just lucky to have a job right now. And you're questioning, what is the path forward for you in your career? So today we are going to attack the job search and talk about what it's like to job search in the middle of a pandemic. So we're going to tackle this in the way of virtual work, virtual interviewing, virtual networking, ways to master those skills and those capabilities in a really uncertain world right now, how to pivot in terms of the things that have changed in the job search environment. And so I have a couple of colleagues joining me for today's discussion. And I would like to welcome Jennifer Carter, who is our EWF company president, and Elizabeth Lyons, who leads the career coaching practice for EWF. And I'm going to ask each one of them to take just a minute and introduce themselves. So Jennifer, why don't we start with you?
Good morning and welcome everyone. As Tanis mentioned, my name is Jennifer Carter. I am president of EWF International. My professional background is marketing and branding, but also organizational strategy and transformation. I've been an entrepreneur, I've been a corporate leader, I've been everything in between. My career started in academia, so I've seen multiple contexts, many different kinds of job searches. And Tanis and I, as a part of EWF, and Elizabeth having joined us, have coached and mentored and trained many women in their job search, and men. And this should be a really good discussion today. So welcome, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Lyons. Some of you know me, others of you don't. I am a career coach. What makes me a little different than some of the other career coaches out there is I actually work in corporate America. And so I know why somebody is hired, fired, or promoted often before they do. I'm the author of 3 books. I've had career coaching practice for 18 years. So I've definitely helped a lot of executives get from point A to point B in transition, whether they were laid off or they're looking for the next opportunity. So anybody who works with us, they'll be in very good hands with our firm.
And I will add to that Elizabeth has worked for many years as an internal recruiter and executive search within corporate America. So she's seen thousands of resumes. She's talked to hundreds of candidates. And so she knows what they do right and what they do wrong. And so we hope to learn some from her perspective in today's discussion. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to conduct a little poll of our audience. So if you have your phones handy, I would ask that each of you grab your phone, because we're going to do a little poll via Slido. If you've not done Slido before, I'll kind of walk you through how to do that. Bear with me here, and so I can share my screen. So if you open the camera on your phone. Jennifer, is the screen up? Can everybody see
Yes.
it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. If you'll open your camera and just point your camera at that QR code, I am going to open a poll, and this will take your phone automatically to the poll. If for some reason it doesn't, from any device, you can just go to slido.com and enter the Slido code 73208, and it will also take you to the poll. So what I'd like to know, based on our audience today, is how you're currently feeling about your career and job search in today's environment. And you can put in more than one answer. It's not limited to one answer, and it will start building this word cloud. I hear this a lot: frustrated, uncertain, confused, anxious. Now that's pretty typical. Hopeful, I'm glad to see some of that. So we'll see that continue to build here as people put that in. Hesitant, concerned about your kids, uneasy, discouraged, not uncommon. Excited? Give it just a minute or two. Well, in our discussions with a lot of our contacts, we hear a lot of the same kinds of emotions that people are feeling right now. The fact that it's uncertain and it's frustrating and sometimes overwhelming is pretty common. So just know that you are not alone. And we recognize that, and we hope to address a little bit of that in today's discussion. So I would really like to introduce the first question to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, you've been working as a career coach, as you said, for 18 years. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of perspective with us this morning on how you have seen this global pandemic change the world of job search, and any observations that you've had that you can share with us.
Yeah, so I think that the word cloud exercise was brilliant because, you know, what was the number one word, Tanis? It was confusion.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got to really let you know that employers right now they're in that exact same place. And to be very transparent with you, their big thought right now is social distancing, when and if we get back to work, dots on the floor. I want you to imagine an office space where you can't go to the bathroom now because there's 10 stalls. Well, where do your employees go to the bathroom? You can't go in the conference rooms now because you can't gather. You can't. Cubicles that are maybe very low, that's not gonna work. The irony is Agile was the big buzz a couple of years ago, and a lot of companies pushed this Agile environment. Agile is all about collaborative workspaces and not working from home. So if you think you're confused, you've taken an HR professional who has an HR background, and now we've made them capacity planners and building planners. This is not their skill set. This is not their skill set. They're learning on the fly. They themselves are confused. They're also very concerned about lawsuits. One employee gets sick, goes home, gives it to somebody else. Heaven forbid that person gets very ill. Heaven forbid that person dies. They track it back. You know, so that's where they're at. They're not really thinking right this minute about hiring. The majority of the companies right now, their minds may or may not be on that. So, you know, what I would say is to any job seeker, you've got to keep going. You've got to have a plan and execute the plan. You've got to do what you need to do to make a move or get that income back, but really have a lot of sensitivity around companies right now. So if you don't hear back, it's really different today, not hearing back in the middle of COVID-19 versus not hearing back 3 years ago. And so to have sensitivity and patience around that, but to keep your plan and keep focused. I mean, that would be the biggest broad range answer I could give to that question that would help you immediately walking away today.
And so it's really going to require more patience from the job seekers, and it's likely that the job search will take longer than it has in the past, you know, due to this. Do you want to touch at all on kind of the economic background and uncertainty? I know you've spoken to that in other webinars that you've done.
Yeah, so I mean, when I did the it's funny about the webinars, you know, every time I do one, I have to update all the slides because the information is very real time. You know, what I talked about a month or two ago is different than now. You know, there was an effect of what happened when we shut everything down. The impact was mostly to, you know, restaurants and service business and entertainment. Now that's had a backslide, right? They're unemployed. Some are going back to work, some are not. Some of those businesses, if they got the business funding, to bridge them 60 or 90 days is not enough because time's gone on. So you're going to see businesses, small to mid-sized businesses closing. And you're going to drive around town and you're going to see your favorite restaurant in your little town that was there for a lot of years, maybe gone now. You're going to start to see empty spaces. When you start to look at corporate American and jobs, you're going to see hiring is done differently. A lot of FaceTime, Zoom meetings, interviews like that. So to be camera ready is important. You're going to see companies looking at 30,000 square feet office buildings. They're going to close them because they pushed everybody remote overnight on a VPN and it's working. And if you can get out of tens of thousands of dollars on the lease and not lay people off, that's what they want to do. So it's definitely changed and it'll continue to change. And actually how we do the job search now is going to change a little bit too. And we'll talk all about that today and make sure you're armed with good information.
We will. Thank you. Just for kind of the overall picture of what it looks like from the employer side, because I do think it is really important for candidates to understand that so that they can respond appropriately to the employers. You know, Jennifer, the level of uncertainty for everyone, and we saw that in the Slido poll, is really high, and it's created a lot of anxiety for people. You know, job searching is always an anxious time. Your full-time job while looking is to look for a job when you're in job transition, but it's not a fun thing to do. It's not everybody's favorite thing to do. And now with a lot of the economic pressures that are around, it's made it even a more anxious time for people. So for both job seekers and hiring managers, it's an anxious time. So talk to us about how anxiety is going to show up in this time of job searching, and maybe what are some of the strategies that candidates can use to manage that anxiety in their search.
Absolutely. So this is something that everyone is experiencing in real time, but you may not have been able to name it. So chronic stress, which is what the majority of people are feeling at this point, whether you're job seeking or not, because of all of the uncertainty and change over the last few months and the pace of change, it shows up much like sleep deprivation. So if you think about if you've been a new parent, or if you've been in all-night study sessions, or sleep deprived for another reason, that shows up as feeling unfocused. You may feel really overextended from an emotional perspective. When we're overextended and we're exhausted and we have chronic stress, what happens is our minds tend to create space where negative narratives come up. So this is not just me saying, don't be negative. What I'm talking about is a lot of neuroscience that shows that the human brain is adapted to fill anxious silences with negative narratives. So the way that shows up for employers is a lot of what Elizabeth talked about. They're going to be much more hesitant to hire. It doesn't mean they're not hiring. It means that they may not have a clear path to it in the way that they understand. They're having to learn how to virtually onboard people. They're trying to think about different functional areas of the business. This really is building the plane on the way down, and employers take taking care of employees very seriously. So that adds additional stress. The way it shows up for job seekers, which you're feeling in real time, is you've likely had some spells where you feel like, I've got this, I can do this, it's going to be fine, we're good, and you're super productive. And then you hit a wall and you're exhausted and you're overextended and you're emotionally wrung out, and your normal kind of ability to process complexity gets really depressed. Everyone is struggling with that. So the main message, and this is echoing what Elizabeth said earlier about persistence, is give yourself some grace, but also realize that if an employer doesn't get back to you, it's not a no. It may be we're focused on other things right now, gently follow up, and Elizabeth's going to talk about ways to do that. But part of the way that anxiety shows up is our normal assumptions about what things mean aren't always as accurate as they would be otherwise, because it's very much through the filter of us feeling this kind of latent anxiety in the world.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do you have anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
No, I think that was a great commentary. I think patience is a key. And the only thing I would go back to, and you're going to have one when you leave here today, but have a plan, get a plan, execute the plan every day, and then get away from it. You know, like do the job search, be consistent, even when you don't want to do it. If you are in the realm that Jennifer talks about and you're extremely stressed out and very upset, then don't do it that day because that's going to bleed all over it. But be really pretty consistent, you know, have your plan, execute your plan, and then there's going to be a lot of downtime, right? And Jennifer raises a good point. The mind will naturally gravitate towards what's wrong. So in your downtime, you want to be doing things that are going to keep you up, keep looking up, because that mental attitude, I've done this a lot of years, the mental attitude, the attitude and approach you have to the job search literally will make your time to hire go down. That's something you can control. Can't control if the employer gets back to you, can't control dots on the floor, how they're going to onboard, can't control any of that. But this, what I really want to touch on today, we'll all talk about is what can you control? Because that anxiety is a stem to, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do it, or there's nothing to do and I'm freaked out. So I think that, you know, Jennifer had some great points there. That's the only commentary I'd add to it.
And the anxiety can create analysis paralysis, where when you don't know what to do, you do nothing. And that is not productive either. So knowing that's not productive, Elizabeth, share with our audience today, you know, some of the things that candidates can do to really address some of these changes in the market.
Yeah, so I think that's what this is all about. Like, let's talk about what you can do and what you can control. Because what you'll find is if you can control something, the anxiety level will go down. The analysis paralysis, Tanis just talked about, I call that the spin. And nothing happens, we just spin. We got an emotion and it spins and that's all it does, which actually makes more confusion. If you decide, then at least you're starting a direction. So what you can control and what you should do is the job search online. And then another really impactful piece would be that networking and reaching out to people in your LinkedIn, people from your last job, people in your industry, and having those Zoom meetings and having those conversations. And the conversation is not, hey, do you know somebody at ABC company, can you get me in? The conversation may not be that at all. The conversation might be, you know, I'd like to move into this industry. What are your thoughts about, you're in the industry, what are your thoughts about that? I always have 2 to 3 questions that I consistently ask when I'm networking to kind of get a poll and a survey and to get some feedback from professionals about what's going on. So networking calls can be as simple as that to get your ear to the ground about what's going on out there. The other thing that I've personally done was I bought a book of lists. So every large city has something called the Book of Lists, the Dallas Book of Lists, the Atlanta Book of Lists. This is literally a book of lists. It's about 100 pages. They take all the companies in the area, small, medium, large, and they take this list and they keep slicing and dicing it. So you'll see female-owned businesses only, large publicly traded, nonprofits. It's all split out in these different lists. And you can literally flip through the pages and really start to ascertain very quickly what is available in my area. Who are the competitors that I could work for in the area? What's out there? I personally bought one because I recruit in the Atlanta area. And I know a whole bunch about Atlanta, and you know, I didn't know as much about banking and financial in the Dallas area. So I spent $75 and I got the Book of Lists, and I pour through there and it'll tell me, you know, kind of who's up, who's down, and what's going on. So that's another research piece that you could do. The networking, I'd spent a lot of time there. And then the other thing I do want to touch on today is measuring success differently. It's not getting the job. It's never getting the job. And especially in the middle of COVID-19 and the future being uncertain, its successes should be measured very differently. That is going to stop the anxiety, the spin, the depression, if you measure your success differently. So before I did this webinar, I actually had an interview with a candidate, and I was talking with her, and you know, I said to her, you know, control the things you can control. And if I were you after this conversation, I would have a little celebration. I would reward myself. Because it's not getting the job. The bottom line was you had the interview with me and I got you the interview now with the hiring manager. Success is not getting the job. Sometimes success is just getting up with a decent attitude and applying online. Sometimes success is just having that to-do list the next day and actually doing it and doing it well and not getting down in the dumps around it. Success is getting the call from the recruiter. Success is, getting your reference sheet together and being ready, camera ready, interview ready. Those are small things that you have to do to prepare for this thing called the job search. Are all those details done? Not just resume and cover letter, but are all those other things done, right? And so there are small things that you can do every day. It's not going to take 8 or 10 hours. It shouldn't. It might take 1 to 2.5, 3, but those should be really good productive times. And so when you wake up at 3 a.m., and I've done this during job search, and you wake up at 3 a.m. and your eyes hit the ceiling and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what about my job? Oh my gosh, what about my income? What's going on? And the anxiety starts. I want you to go back and I want you to think through your day and ask yourself, did I do everything possible to get a position? Did I do all the activity today? And if the answer comes back yes, go to sleep and give yourself a break. If the answer comes back no, think about what you would do different the next day, because it all adds up and it's just small steps, and then all of a sudden you get the call and you get the offer. So focus on activity, good activity, having integrity within your activity, good conversations, intentional networking, and trust the process, because you don't know where it's going to end up, and all you really have is the process you can control.
During much of my corporate career, I was in a sales leadership function, VP of sales for 2 or 3 different companies. And a lot of what we would focus on with sales teams were all the activities that lead to a sale. And that you have to do all of those activities along the way to ultimately get the sale. And it's a matter of numbers. And it's a matter of managing each component of those activities. So you have to start out by prospecting. From those prospects, you'll get a certain number of proposals. And then from those number of proposals, you'll eventually close a certain percentage of sales. And a job search is very, very similar. In today's environment, what that means is you have to do a lot more prospecting, and your close ratio may be lower. But the activities are the same. It's basically you just do more of them. And to reward yourself along the way, you have to build a pipeline of opportunities. And so you have to really go back and create a plan that leads you to that pipeline. So in fact, Elizabeth, you mentioned having a plan. If someone were to have a plan, what are some of those activities? How does that plan look like? When you're working with a client to create a plan, what are some of those things that you really touch on that they need to do in creating their plan?
The first thing that we work through and we touch on is, where did you come from and where do you want to go? And right now, the blessing in all this COVID-19 is you do have time for reflection. And I would capitalize on that. So I want you to think about that when you leave here. What was great about my last job? What did I not like at all about my last job? What were the common things that came up in all my reviews over the years? What do people think I'm good at? What do I think I'm good at? We do a pretty deep session, an hour and a half or so, around where did you come from? Where are you going? What do you want? What do you not want? They're at least give you some ideas. They put some stake in the road about what you want and what you don't want. It shouldn't be rigid when you're in the job search, but it gives you some idea about where you want to go and who you are and what you're good at, because that's what you have to offer, right? So that's the first thing that would be important. And then the second thing, I always look broad. So I look at competitors first. Who else would love to have you, or at least know you're available? I look at competitors if there's not a non-compete. I look at industry, typically, or other industries that are going to be close or similar that would want to know about you and want to know about your skill set. Then I start to dive into titles. It's amazing to me how many clients come to me and I look at their resume. I'm like, you could be called 5 things in the market. You're all focused in this one title. You could be called 5 things. Especially if you look in banking and financial and in that area. So then there might be 2 iterations of the resume that are appropriate, maybe not. Then I start to look at the actual nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the search. Where are we looking? How do we do that? And then actually creating a networking list. And all of those components, takes a while to pull all of that together. And then you literally have your to-do list. You have your strategy, and then you have your to-do list that you are executing on every day.
Thank you. Jennifer, a lot of what we talk about in a lot of our EWF development programs is, people understanding their superpowers, and how does that apply to the job search? And what are a few things that job seekers can do to be more intentional? We talk about career intentionality. So speak to that in terms of a job search, if you would.
Sure. So one of those things that about the term superpower is it feels a little fluffy, but what we've discovered in EWF and in our personal careers is that it really does define how you navigate your career. So let me be very specific. When you talk about a superpower, it is not the list of things that you can do. Many resumes are a block of text that are exhaustively listing all the things that you've done, but they don't get a sense of what your real gifts are. And what a superpower is your unique approach to work. What are the things that make you really impactful, articulated in terms of what value it delivers to the company. So resumes have to tell the company why they want to hire you, not as an employee, but what problem you're solving. What is the value you add? Many job seekers never take this exercise. And I can't speak for Elizabeth, but I suspect this is true because it's certainly true for me and Tanis. When someone hands me a resume, or I sit down across the table from someone and they introduce themselves in the first 5 minutes, I can tell whether or not they understand whether or not what their superpower is, because it's either a list of things they've done. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've worked here, I've done that, I've lived here, or it's here's what I'm really gifted at. I'm great at finding an efficiency in operations. And here's an example of how I applied that across multiple different roles, multiple industries. We're going to dive into a little more of that, but understanding how your gifts, and everyone on this call has something that delivers value for a company. So work is not just, am I good at my immediate job? It's, can the company recognize what you do as value? Doing that work is crucial for understanding how to navigate your career. And so understanding your superpower, that's a huge one. Elizabeth mentioned your why. So we're not glossing over the fact that this pandemic happened so fast that many of you on this call and many of us in the world are feeling financial pressure in a new way. It's not like anybody had a running start at a total economic shutdown in like 2 weeks. No one saw that coming. No one planned for that. So I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of financial pressure to get hired, but reinforce what Elizabeth said and what Tanis said, that even though you're feeling that pressure, the quickest way to being hired is not a shotgun approach of, thrashing and reaching out to everyone you can know. It's being really intentional. It's understanding how to apply your skill sets to other industries, understanding what's out there, the advice that Elizabeth gave. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, start somewhere that feels manageable. What am I good at? Look at all of my past history. Talk to people who know me. What do they think I'm gifted at? My superpower, as an example, is I'm insightful. That feels really soft, but that allows me to manage risk for a company really effectively. It helps me to get underneath all of the information and understand what's important. Tanis's superpower, do you want to share that with the group as an example so they can see what that really is?
One of the things that's made me successful throughout my career, no matter what I've done, is my ability to move idea into execution. That I can grasp an idea and create a framework for how we would execute to bring that idea to fruition. And I did that in many different roles and in a couple of different industries, but it was that ability that made me successful at each of those roles. And then I could share particular examples of how I established that in different roles that I did. And so that was the value in my interviewing that I could bring to organizations, is that ability to take idea and move it into real action.
Right, and this is one of those areas where both Elizabeth and Tanis mentioned this, right? One of the economic changes that COVID and the economic conditions today has brought is there are some industries that are just flat not hiring. And there are some that have been impacted in the other direction and they're hiring like mad. And then there are some in the middle. You might be in an industry that has all but stopped hiring. If you are working for a cruise industry, for example, that is not likely to be an industry that's going to be hiring quickly. Understanding your superpower, and that's just what we call it, allows you to think about how can I make the hiring manager's job easier in understanding how I can add value in a new industry. So if you were in a cruise direction or cruise industry and you want to go into another industry, understanding what you're good at and thinking about how that translates between roles, between industries. How can I add value? Tanis is a great example. The ability to move strategy into execution and see all of that planning landscape is valuable regardless of industry. So make sure that you understand how your experience translates. We often get very tangled in titles and roles and industry, and of course industry expertise matters, but right now the people who can pivot best are the ones who understand their skill set and their value and can make the hiring manager's job easier by articulating that in terms of how they solve problems for companies, not a specific company, different kinds of companies. The other thing I would encourage you to do is reinforcing what others have said, is move beyond titles. We get very tangled up sometimes in titles. I want that job. I'm job searching a title. Hiring managers, they title things in different ways. There are different opportunities across different industries. Different industries do different titling levels. And so understanding what you're really good at and thinking about the functional value of that skill set allows you to broaden your search in terms of titles. And that's really, really important when you're trying to pivot.
Thank you. And one of the things that I've always coached people in transition to do, and thinking about the superpower, is to create 5 success stories in their career and literally write them out. What was your success story? How was your superpower engaged in that success story? And what was the result that you drove for that company? And when you write out these 5 success stories, it comes in handy in a number of ways. The first one is when you are virtual networking and you are exploring your options. Just, you can give some examples. Here's a couple of examples of results that I've delivered and how I've delivered them. So I'm now interested in understanding, in the industry that you're in, what are some of the roles that are out there where these skills could be applied and I could add value in this industry, since my experience is from another industry. And those kinds of conversations often will get you recognized and directed to opportunities. And I know in my own career, I can point to 3 different times when the specific job didn't even exist when I was talking to that company, but they recognized, oh, she's got something that would be good for our company. I'm either going to create a role for that, or I'm going to find the next role that I can find to fit Tanis into. I'm going to go back and hire her. And that's happened to me 3 different times that I can point to in my own career. So often it's not about applying for a specific job. It's having those conversations with people where they see your skill set, and then they can apply that to their own industry and their own team even sometimes. Also, the one thing I would add to what Jennifer said is think about, in this new normal, what are the things that companies need the most? So as I've researched and I've read, obviously the ability to work and lead remotely is a key skill set that companies need. So if you are a person who has managed virtual teams before and you've done that successfully, you want to create success stories that show how you successfully led, built, and motivated a team remotely, because that's a needed skill set regardless of the job function. Also, the ability to, the one skill I heard recently, I was reading about that, it said that the one most necessary skill going into the future is learning agility. So how do you create success stories that illustrate your ability to have learning agility? Where did you go in and do something you'd never done before, but really successfully accomplish that? and what were the skill sets you used to accomplish that. And making that one of your success stories can then provide an illustration to people that you're networking with and people that you're interviewing with of your capabilities. So when you have those success stories written out, and it can be more than 5, but at least 5, that illustrate some different aspects of your abilities, when you're in an interview and someone asks you a question, and you can respond by saying, and let me give you an example. And now you have that success story at top of mind, and you can give that example and the results that that drove for the organization that you were with, and then follow that up by how that could be applied to the position that you're interviewing for. Because I can tell you that the majority of people out there that are interviewing don't do that. And so that can help you to stand out amid the crowd when you are able to successfully do that.
I want to add really quickly, excellent counsel, Tanis. I want to add to everyone out there who struggles to answer the question of what do companies need? I'm going to ask that question in a slightly different way. It's where are they feeling the pain, right? If you could put yourself in that company's shoes, knowing what you're dealing with as a person, the being virtual, having anxiety around all of these things, looking at different levels of infrastructure, what do you imagine those companies are dealing with? You don't have to go and do a bunch of research on, industry experts. If you want to do that, great. That may be something that helps you feel less anxious. But what we're asking is have some professional empathy in that. What do you think their pain points are? And many companies, even in the way they write job descriptions, will tell you their pain points. Read those job descriptions with that in mind. What is it they're solving for? What's the pain they're feeling? Because then you can customize that profile, that resume, that cover letter, that response to be the solution to that problem. Because I can tell you, think about how hiring managers are already feeling under pressure, and they're, Elizabeth spoke to it earlier, they're being asked to do brand new things in a new environment, just like all of us are. If you have a candidate who looks like the solution to your problem, and you only have a few seconds to review those resumes, that one's going on the maybe or the yes list. Like that's this is a branding thing. The simpler you can make it for your audience to see how you can solve their problem, the more you'll be noticed, and you'll be able to get to the tell me more stage. Because as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, your ultimate goal right now may be to get the job, but there are a lot of successes on the way to that. And the tell me more stage may be something that you want to celebrate. That's the next step, or the interview, or the second interview. Those are all steps that are really important.
Thank you. So we're coming up with about 5 minutes left in terms of our panel discussion. So I'd like to ask, Jennifer and Elizabeth both, what would you like to leave our audience with today? What action can they take? What should they remember out of the discussion today? And then once we do that with Jennifer and with Elizabeth, we will open this up for questions. So if anybody has a question, you can type it into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and actually ask real time if you'd like to do that. Some people don't like to speak, but either way works for us. And so I'll start with you, Elizabeth. Just in wrapping kind of up the formal part of our panel discussion today, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so there's 2 things I want to piggyback on. One is Jennifer's superpower, and I want to give you a tangible example of that, because I think we talk about it, but I want to give you an example of exactly how that plays out. What does that look like? It happened to me. It happened to me on my last interview 8 years ago. And the question the interview asked me was, I'm going to talk to 5 other candidates. What's unique about you? Jot that down. If you can't answer that in an interview, flag. You got to be able to answer that in an interview. And here's what I said. It's exactly what I said. Give me a minute. I need to think about that. And then I said, what makes me really different is I know exactly what to document and exactly what not to document. So if our company ever went to an HR audit, or you had a legal claim against you, I have the right documentation in place that you will not be sued or fined from an HR perspective. I also know what to leave out of the notes. I know what to phone call with a hiring manager versus an email with a hiring manager versus what needs to be documented for the file for audit and compliance. So every time I hire someone, I'm thinking, if this rec is pulled in 3 years and they say, why did you hire Sally and not Joe? I can tell you exactly why Sally was qualified for the job. And that got me the job because she went, wow, I've never heard about that before. You've been through an audit. I said, I've been through audits. I've made them. My stuff is really clean. I think that makes me really unique. I didn't think much about it, and I ended up getting the job. And looking back, I got the job because I knew what the superpower was. I knew what made me unique and not just a run-of-the-mill recruiter. It's what makes me unique as a coach, frankly. So I wanted to show you how that plays out. It's really important you can answer that question. Then I want to ask Tanis, boy, you framed that up beautifully, Tanis. You said, and I'm going to misquote this, so I want you to say it. What has always made me successful in my career, didn't matter what job or role. That packaging, how she framed that up, verbatim, jot that down. So Tanis, would you go back to that? How did you say that?
I've always said that my skill set was to be able to take strategy and move it into execution.
Yeah, but you framed it. You framed that up. You said you framed it before you said your superpower. You said didn't matter what role I was in. What always made me successful
was my ability to take strategy and move it into execution.
Okay.
Able to take an idea.
Okay, so that's what I want to leave you with. Now, this is also the benefit of working with a coach. A coach can often identify these things because you're in it and you can't see it sometimes. And this is the benefit of that kind of a partnership. But that's exactly how you would frame it up. You know, so think about it. The two things I want to leave you with is, employer ever asked you, and they probably won't, I'm going to talk to 5 other candidates, what's special about you? That's your superpower. And then how do you frame that up? Because if they don't ask that question, you absolutely want to seed that in the interview like Tanis just did. And that is gold that I'm going to leave you with today.
I'm going to add one comment because there are probably only about 20% of interviewers out there who are really good at it. You will interview with a lot of people that are lousy at interviewing. So you've got to understand what points you want to get across to those interviewers, and creating those success stories is one of the best ways to do that, because you can weave in all those special things about yourself that they need to know even if they didn't ask. So understand, one of your jobs is to make sure they get the information even if they don't ask. So, Jennifer, what final thoughts from you?
So there are 2 things, and then I want to have Elizabeth do a brief description around video interviewing, because I know that that's top of mind for everyone. So one thing is, when you think about virtual networking, and we've touched on this, but this is probably one of the #1 questions I get asked by everybody, is how do I network before COVID, and then how do I certainly do it virtually? So think about networking not as getting something from someone. Think about networking as building meaningful relationships. So if you don't have a big network, or you want to reach out to someone, Tanis and Elizabeth both mentioned it, ask for their insights, not for something from them, right? Ask to be a sounding board. So we talk about this in our programming as the ask and the offer. So everyone on this call has something of value to offer another person. I don't mean giving your work away. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying call them and say, I will do X for nothing. What I mean is, you have valuable perspective. You can be a sounding board for them. They can be a sounding board for you. So when you build networking relationships, if you're cold, reaching out to them on LinkedIn or asking for an introduction, think about what exactly do you want to ask them for in terms of their insight or their perspective on their industry, because people like giving advice. It helps them feel seen and heard and validated, and they can add value, especially in a time when they don't feel like they're adding value in other ways. That's a gift to other people. The other thing is, think about what you can offer in return. That may be you're a sounding board, maybe you're an expert in a specific industry, maybe you offer the ability to make connections for them. Think about your ask and your offer and be very specific about it. That's a really effective way to network. And if you have someone who's connected to someone on LinkedIn, ask for a warm introduction. And the way you ask for that is, do you know that person well enough to be comfortable to introduce me to that person. That gives them an out, but it also gives them an opportunity to say, absolutely, I'm happy to make that introduction. That's the first thing. The second is be kind to yourself. And that sounds fluffy, but man, it is hard to put into practice. If you're on this call, it means that you want to learn more about how to do this. You are someone who's dedicated to self-study. You might be an achiever nature. I am certainly an achiever by nature. If you're going to give me an A, I'm going to be your friend. If you're not, I'm going to go find someone who can. And that, it can be very demoralizing if you're an achiever to feel like you can't get there. You can't win. You can't find an outcome. So be kind to yourself. If you're feeling particularly overextended, build in a rest period. I don't mean like lay on the couch for 2 weeks watching Netflix. I mean, give yourself a break, allow yourself to walk away from it, keep your plan in place, but don't push so hard that you burn yourself out, because you are going to have much more limited emotional reserves. And it is okay to recognize this is a lengthy journey. It's not going to be a sprint, and it's going to be hard, but you can totally get there.
Thank you,
And then
Jennifer.
I would like to have Elizabeth do the video interviewing.
Yeah,
Well, and I know, go ahead.
I'm going to give you like the top 3 or 4 tips and tricks, because actually after this video, I have something I have to go do, but this is kind of cool stuff. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to give you show and tell, because what I find is you can read 100 articles, but it's the show and tell that's, powerful. And I also want to make fun of myself, because you can totally judge me, and I think you'll get, oh yeah, that doesn't look right. So when you're on a video call, the biggest thing I can tell you, everybody is so focused on my face and how do I look and my hair, and it's not that, it's actually your background. It's your background. So put some time and emphasis in your background. That tree, I put that tree there. I put that tree there 15 minutes before this webinar. Let me show you this. I'm not in a great space. The lighting is great. I know that because I was in the other room. That didn't work. Look at this. That's a light switch. But if I turn it this way, you don't see that. For me personally, I always am sitting like this. All the PR photographs you'll see, I'm usually sitting like this. This conveys open. I'm open information. I'm giving. I'm open. So I'm in a chair like that. Me personally, I don't like this. For me, it's too much space. I like a 3/4 shot. What do you feel when I do this? You feel like I'm listening. Your brain goes, oh my God, it's like she's sitting right across from me. It's supernatural. That's just my style. I haven't seen anybody else on a video anything but the way I do or do what I do, but that's me. And I've done this for years though. That's the other piece. So I'm pretty smooth at it. But I figured out my background. I could figure out what worked. Let me tell you what I don't like. The moment I got on camera, I was like, the white shirt, too much white. Okay, so I have 4 webinars this week. I'm not gonna be wearing the white shirt again. Bold jewelry is your friend. Bold jewelry here brings the eye up to the face, frames everything. If you're a female, lipstick is your friend. Even if it's lip gloss, it's your friend. It gives depth, dimension to your face. Jennifer and I are clearly really comfortable, so we like move our hands a lot, and over time you'll get there. But these are the things that you want to master, because the reality is, even next year, we're still in video interviews, and we may go to video interviews as last interview. So what I would say is, what you see today is, 90+ days of other than the white shirt, really nailing it, really paying attention to my background, looking at my camera speed, looking at my network, looking at my router speed, looking at my lighting. So every week that I was doing webinars and I was on camera, I would do it and I would say, I want to change that. And I would up my game just a little bit. I would up. So when you leave here, take one thing and change it, and then go on the next video call and try that. But your goal by October should be that when you're on camera, you feel natural, you're not anxious, and that you're very comfortable. And then the pieces around the background, that's what's going to bring the audience into you, right? That's going to bring into you. And that's why that's an important piece as well. And I bring up.
And I will add to that. Oh, go ahead.
Tanis.
I was just going to say, when you back up a little bit, and I'm pretty close because I'm moderating today, but if in an interview, I would back up a little bit, because it allows the interviewer to see more of your body language. And on video, It's harder to pick up on the body language, and it's a lot of the way that we communicate. So backing up just a little bit is actually advantageous in allowing the interview to see more of your body language. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I would just add to that, the number one mistake I see, there are a lot of nitpicky things and that I'm guilty of myself, is we interact with video as if we're interacting with technology. If you've ever done the Zoom stare, like all of you've done this, we've all done it. Don't interact with someone you're having a conversation with that way. We forget our faces when we're interacting with technology in a way that you would never do if you were in front of someone. So get comfortable. If you are not comfortable on camera and it's not something you do well naturally, it takes a lot more energy to push through that camera. So have a Zoom happy hour with your friends. Get to the point where you are comfortable personally interacting, and give the people who are talking the gift of facial expressions. Like, you wouldn't just stare at someone who's talking. What we do is we smile, we nod, we interact with them. And that is a gift to the other person on that phone, on that video call, because they know you're engaged. So it's not just the normal I'm relaxed body language. That is crucial, but don't do Zoom face, please. I've seen it a lot, and it's very difficult for someone who's speaking, because you're like, can they hear me? Am I muted? Are there technical problems? Do they hate me? Am I stupid? Like, you start to get super conscientious or self-conscious. So get comfortable with the medium, not just professionally. If you don't do this with your friends or your family, add some of that to your calendar. It does warm you up. It makes you think about those facial expressions. Look at yourself on camera. No one typically likes to look at themselves on camera. Do it ahead of your interview. Do not crash course this, because it will make you that much more nervous. Give the person who's talking the gift of interaction, and you'll feel more relaxed.
And two very quick tactical things. Make sure that you position your camera at eye level.
Yes.
You don't want someone looking up your nostrils as you're speaking. And I've seen a lot of that on some of these Zoom calls. So you want the camera to be eye level, so that when you look and smile at that screen, you're smiling into the camera, and people feel a more personal connection that way. The second piece is to make sure you're not sitting where you are backlit. Don't sit where you have a big window right behind you, because what happens, it throws your face in shadow. So if you have that situation, have a drape or blinds, and then have a light, maybe a desk lamp that's in front of your computer, that's shining light on your face. So for me, as an example, I have a desk lamp that I turn on, and that helps to highlight the light on my face, because that's what people want to see. So just two really easy, quick things that you can do that will help your presentation be better when you are virtually interviewing and networking. So we would like to open the floor now to some additional questions. I haven't seen anything come up on the chat, so that if anybody would like to unmute and ask a question, I would be happy to take those questions. Would anybody like to ask a question?
Drop it in the chat, either one.
Or drop it in the chat, either one. One thing I will ask, because I know that it comes up a lot, and I think some people may find it interesting, Elizabeth, and I know this is something you work with your clients on, and our clients on. A lot of people, they want to know how they get through so many times now, resumes are fed through AI before a person ever sees them. So you've got to have the correct keywords and all of that. Any suggestions for people, both on their LinkedIn profile and on their resume, to navigate through the upfront systems that are screening resume, and recruiters that are going through LinkedIn and screening on LinkedIn?
I think there's a lot of anxiety around that. And in this time of COVID-19, I wouldn't be overly anxious about getting it right. Because I'll tell you, because I hire people every day, all day long, the applicant pool isn't a lot. I'm not screening 150 candidates for a project manager job. It's not happening. Director, vice president, forget it. There's 3 to 5 there. I wouldn't be worried about that because the recruiters have more time to read it. But to answer your question succinctly, every job title would map to 5 basic skills. And if you have those 5 skills, then you know that you would qualify for the position. More importantly, rather than being anxious about what's on the resume, to Jennifer's point, can't say it enough, I've been in this business a long time, read the qualifications. Real simple, read the qualifications. They need to be on the resume. You know, if they're asking for 15 years of IT experience as a base model, make sure you have that, make sure it points to that. The qualification lists usually aren't very long, but make sure you capture them. In the last year and a half, the candidate pool has gotten really lazy, pre and post COVID-19. So they throw their resumes out there, they don't match the job, and thank God I'm on the other end, because I pick up the phone and go, hey, your resume didn't say this and that, do you have that? And 99% of the time they do, it just wasn't on the resume. Had I not asked the question, I just would have declined them out and checked the box legally, check the box, doesn't meet minimum qualifications. So don't get all anxious about that too much right now, because there's some things in your favor in terms of low applicant pool, but read the job ads, and what you hone in on is the qualifications.
Okay, so a couple of other questions have come in. So let me just go back up here real quickly, because there were a couple that I wanted to answer. Someone asked—
tackle the salary one. That one's, I get a lot. Tackle that one.
And so Elizabeth, one of the questions is, you know, in this situation, are there any recommendations for negotiation around salary? Does that look different today than it looked like, you know, pre-COVID? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what my feeling was. Those that are hiring, it's because they have a need and there's a demand for that. And so, you know, do your research. You have to know what your value is and basically what the salary range is for the position. Knowledge is power when you enter into those negotiations. But I don't think you accept less because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, if you don't have to, don't. I mean, legally, they can't ask you in many states. Legally, they cannot ask you. I used to be able to ask, what do you make? What do you want to make? Can't legally, they shouldn't be asking that. But what you can provide is a range, and your range should be a $20,000 spread. So you better figure out your flinch point, because maybe, you know, their time is money, and the longer you're out, I mean, can you financially be out until January? Okay, you might take a job and be at the lower end of your range, but still be able to, you know, make your financial obligations. So you have your range. You know, I'm looking for a role between 90 and 110. You know, you can give them a range, but be honest with yourself about what your flinch point is, because women will often take less. Don't do that, because it'll diminish your skill set. That's the only piece I would say, but nothing's changed there, really.
Okay.
So I would tack on that quickly. Is when we in the data, we know that women typically will settle for a lower amount than men typically do. That shows in the data. We know that. One of the reasons why is because they do refer back to their previous salaries as a starting place in their own minds. Go do your research and learn what you're worth in the market. That's the first thing. I'm just going to reiterate. Both Tanis and Elizabeth said that. I'm going to reiterate it. The second is understand the notion of perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
So Elizabeth mentioned this. I'm going to put a finer point on it.
I love it.
If I were to drive up in a Ferrari and say I paid $10 for it, your first question is it stolen? What's wrong with it? Is there something I don't know about it?
Yeah.
So we assign value as buyers, and hiring is a buying transaction of a certain sort, to a price point. That doesn't mean you come in and say, I paid $5 million for it. And I'd be like, you're an idiot. So understand what the market value is, because that helps the employer say she's done her he's done his research. They understand what their own value is and negotiate for that. The other point I would make, and we teach this as a practicum in our Emerging Leaders program through EWF, is bundle your salary negotiations with other things. So don't just negotiate around salary. Negotiate a raise in 6 months if you meet certain benchmarks, or negotiate paid time off or flexibility or work from home. Bundle those asks, because then that gives them places to negotiate with, so that if you If you're really important around this one thing and you add 4 others, that gives you both wiggle room to move, to negotiate. Come at it from a holistic perspective rather than getting locked into a number, because what happens is you go back and forth and back and forth and they go, I can't deal with this person. So bundle those asks. If you want more information on that, we do a practicum of that in Emerging Leaders.
And I'm going to do one last question before we have to close. Someone's asked, do we have recommendations for additional resources on defining your superpower? And I'll give you just a couple. Jennifer mentioned one is talk to the people who know you, your coworkers, your boss. You know, how does the organization view me? What is the perception of me? How does the organization view my skills? Sometimes people find out things that they really hadn't thought about for themselves. So those kinds of conversations are really good at helping you identify how others see your particular skill sets. We work with a set of assessment tools from a company called Lumina Learning, and we utilize those assessment tools in our coaching practice to help people specifically identify those qualities that really come naturally to them, that are really their particular gifts, that they don't even have to try hard. It just is who they are. And so there are ways that you can learn that through assessments as well as through those conversations. And so I will wrap up today with sharing with you that if any of you would like more information on our career coaching practice, we do have an 8-session finite program. It's a specific program for people in the job search or people who want to be in the job search. If you'd like more information, you can drop an email to info@ewfinternational.com or simply place a request through our website, through one of the contact forms, and we would be happy to give you that info. So our time is up today, but we thank all of you for joining us, and we really wish you the best. I'm sure that some of you on this call are in a job search, and I know it's a difficult time, and our hopes are and our desires are for your best, and we hope that you weather this storm and come out great on the other side. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.